DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Time for our Aussie perspective as we review round 9 of Super Rugby, and our great mate Christy Doran is again with us from the Raw out of Sydney. And let's start there, mate, because New South Wales, that has got to be one of the surprise results of the season, surely. And I say that given the fact they were towed up so badly here in New Zealand. They caught the Chiefs on a bad night, but fair play to them. They played bloody well.
Mate, I don't think there would have been anyone on this side of the ditch that thought the Waratahs were beating the Chiefs on Friday night. I was there and I was as stunned as anyone else, partly because of how poorly Damian McKenzie played. It was a game that was just surprising from go to woe. Like, for an All Black to drop the ball, I think it was 7 times, was just stunning. And we thought right until the end, there's probably another twist. Eventually the Chiefs will show up. They didn't, and the Waratahs showed some nerve. They showed some mettle, didn't they, to defend the 28 phases. I reckon they got a little bit lucky there with Joseph Christasuale, probably a deliberate knockdown. But the reality is the Chiefs gave away the Waratahs gave away 18 penalties. And to come away with the 7-point win is pretty incredible. And it keeps their finals hopes alive.
How good are they? Because they can't seem to win unless they're at home.
Yeah, I don't think they are that good at the moment, but that's what happens when you bring a brand new team and a brand new coaching staff together. And if I think about in 2018, Dan McKellar took over from Stephen Larkham at the Brumbies, and it took quite a while to get going. It took right until really the last round of the competition. They missed the finals, and then a year later they made the semi-finals. They lost against Argentina away. And the Brumbies have kind of gone from strength to strength. Whereas if I look at the Tars, they're coming off the back of being last in 2024. And there's elements of their game that are impressive. They've got a star-studded side. I know that Dan McKellar doesn't like it when I say that, but they do. And they're just doing enough to hang in the fire, aren't they? They're in the top 6 and they're kind of entrenched there. I'll tell you what, though, they've got a difficult month to come, and it starts this weekend against Fiji up at Churchill Park in Lautoka. I think there's going to be 1 or 2 players that are left behind. And I think the Waratahs will run out of puff towards the end of the season. But I thought that last weekend too, and I was proven wrong.
Let's go to Brisbane then. We're a 14-0 lead for the Reds, and I've been saying it right throughout the podcast. 34 unanswered points, the Brumbies, in reply to that, and then you got to try each at the end, which, adjusts the scoreline. But how impressive were those Brumbies to effectively just squash them?
I think the weather was always going to be an equaliser, but if you had watched the first 5 minutes of that game, you would have thought that the Reds, there was no rain whatsoever, and you would have thought that the Reds are going to go on to win this handsomely. They started spectacularly, and Hunter Paisami scores a phenomenal try, chip and chase down the left-hand touchline, and you thought, hang on a moment, what about the rain that's just saturated Brisbane earlier in the day? And then that had just kind of, the wheels fell off. The Brumbies found a bit. Rob Valentini went the Route 1 channel, just barged over the top of Tim Ryan, who was just steamrolled in contact, and the Brumbies just found their feet, and it looked pretty simple in the end. Yeah. And Stephen Larkham, you saw him at the end of at full time, composed figure at the best of times, and at the worst of times too. And he just thought, you know what, we played pretty well, and they did. And that's a massive blow for the Reds, because they looked like the one side that you thought they might be able to challenge a New Zealand team if they have a top 2 finish, host a semi-final. But I'll tell you what, they've really let that slip, and it's 2 defeats in the row. And now the Brumbies, off the back of a really tough opening month where they had to go to Fiji, they had, they had to take on the Chiefs and the Blues in New Zealand in the opening month. All of a sudden, their campaign is kind of set up, and you wouldn't rule the Brumbies out from going on a bit of a roll here. And 4 Aussie sides in the top 6, who would have thought that, Marty, after 9-10 weeks to the competition?
Yeah. Look, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks ago that it happened for the first time. We were looking at it thinking, and I think everyone on this side of the Tasman has probably been waiting for that to change, but there's still 4 sides there. Look, no disrespect to the Force, I can't see them staying there. I mean, they've got, a home game this weekend, of course, and then, they come to New Zealand for that trip. I agree with you about New South Wales, their itinerary, when you look at it at the back end. Can we honestly say that, I mean, does that mean the Brumbies are the best side in Australia in this competition, given that result?
Look, you've got to, I think you have to say that. Like you look at the fact is that they lost Len Ikitau after 2 minutes due to a really savage head knock there where he ran into, where he tried to tackle Lockie Anderson and got his head in the wrong spot. Yeah. So to lose a world-class outside centre so early, have an Ollie Sapsford come in, play beautifully, did his job. They did lose Blake Shot, though, to a season-ending Achilles injury, and that's a massive blow because the Wallaby loosehead prop had really found his feet in 2025, really injury-plagued season last year, and the loss of him will test the Brumbies' depth. I have no doubt about that. So that's a big, big blow. The Reds had missed 4 or 5 Wallabies, and you think about Harry Wilson, Filippo Dambunu. There was no Josh Luke as well. Matt Thesler went off early. So the Reds will get a couple of guys back in the next few weeks. And if they can stay in the hunt in the top 3 or 4, the deeper this season goes on, I think they're the sort of side that can finish stronger than the Brumbies. But the two of those Aussie sides, they're the ones I think you have to watch out for in 2025. I agree. The Force, they had the Hurricanes this week. Then a couple of matches across the ditch as well. So they've got a really difficult second half of the season, as do the Tars. So I think it's the Brumbies or the Reds, or you're going to be watching another New Zealand side take out another championship.
Is that top 4 set in stone? I mean, this is the great thing about this competition, isn't it? Is that we look at after 9 rounds and there's still, it's like the NRL, there's a big log jam of teams that are all scrapping for those, maybe the last couple of playoff spots. Can we say the top 4 are going to be the top 4?
I think so, yes, okay. Because the Hurricanes aren't that great, are they? No. They've got a pretty good front row,
game, but
without your 10 there, without Geordie Barrett there, they do look like they're just missing a little bit in those inside channels at the moment. I don't think that they're going to win anything with Hopire at 10 there. Ruben Love has got a bit about him, of course, but I think there's a bit too much on his young shoulders at the moment.
What about the Blues, though? They're 3-5, and 2 of the wins are against the Hurricanes. Then they beat Moana on the weekend. They play bloody well in that game. Have you seen enough to suggest that they are to be worried about coming into the back end of the season?
You'd have to say so. You, as an Aussie team, you don't want to be coming up against the Blues. I think they're starting to find their groove again. And you just had to look at their breakdown work, didn't you, Marty? It was much better on the weekend against Moana Pasifika on Saturday. It was better, a week before that against the Hurricanes when Beauden Barrett pulled the strings masterfully. They're a side that if there's a team to threaten the top 4, they're definitely the ones. But have they left their run a little bit too late? I'll tell you what, though, if they end up coming 5th or 6th and they have to take on a New Zealand team in a quarter final, blimey, you wouldn't want to come up against them, would you?
I think that, we were talking about this earlier, that they're kind of in that position that everyone thought the Crusaders might be last year, that we were looking over the shoulder the whole time thinking, are they going to make it? Because if they do, we don't want to play them in the playoffs. That's where I think the Blues are at. Yeah,
exactly. The loss of also Tuangafasi is a big one. Mm-hmm. You can't. Big games are won up front come finals footy, and that's the question mark about these Aussie sides is it's all well and good showing a bit of physicality in the first half of the season. It's how you finish the season. So that's a big blow for them. But tell you what, Patrick Tuipulotu, he's still there. He's still chewing through the business and the work there. Nice to see Hoskins to Tutu and Dalton Papali'i show a bit as well. And if those guys get going, I think that back line will follow. And, the Rico Ioane conundrum, he's a man who's got a lot to prove over the second half of the season if he's going to look to keep his All Blacks number 13 position as well. So it's a good position to be in if you're Vern Cotter because you know that there's a lot to play for at this point in time.
Yeah, round 9. I mean, still 7 rounds to go and there's so much to unfold in front of us. And I can't let you go without you were watching like we were here as well, getting a glimpse of it, that final round of the Masters. And did Rory McIlroy go through every single emotion that a human being could go through, as well as probably his whole career and his whole golfing life in front of him in 18, 19 holes?
I'll tell you what, it's taken 11 years for Rory McIlroy to take out the Grand Slam. He kind of felt like it took 14 years. And it's a bit like being a Wallabies supporter. You're just hoping that eventually they might get across the line in a Bledisloe Cup or bring back Bill. It was just years, wasn't it? And I reckon it's every Monday, like this Monday of an April every year is just sports porn for the average Joe who wakes up on a Monday morning, might have a coffee or a bacon and egg burger, and you're just strapped in. And it was the roller coaster of a lifetime for Rory. It was awesome to watch.
Devlin.